Chapter 1. The Note on the Counter. The neurologist had smiled when he said it. "Your numbers look good, Daniel. Keep walking. Keep resting. No stress. No stress." Daniel nodded the way men do when they know advice is ornamental. He left the clinic with a thin folder tucked under his arm and the faint scent of antiseptic clinging to his jacket. The winter air outside was sharp but clean. He paused on the sidewalk longer than necessary, letting the cold settle into his lungs. 3 months ago, he hadn't been sure he'd feel cold air again. A minor stroke, they called it. Minor. There's nothing minor about watching your own hand refuse to obey you. He slid in his car, carefully, steady, deliberate. The tremor was gone now. His speech had returned weeks ago. The weakness had retreated like a tide that never fully admits it came in. He drove home through streets he'd known for 17 years. Every turn was muscle memory. Every stop sign had history. When he pulled into the driveway, something felt wrong. It wasn't obvious. It was subtle. The garage door didn't lift when he pressed the remote. He pressed it again. Nothing. He frowned, stepped out, and walked to the keypad mounted beside the garage. He entered the 4 digits slowly. The keypad blinked red. Denied. He stood there for a moment, staring at the small red light, as if it might correct itself out of embarrassment. He entered it again. Red. Daniel glanced at the front of the house. Curtains drawn. No lights on. The place looked intact. Calm. Undisturbed. He checked his watch. 2:14 p.m. Evelyn knew he had an appointment. She'd kissed his cheek that morning. Lightly. Briefly. The way one closes a door without latching it. He walked to the front entrance and entered the security code. The panel flashed. Access denied. He didn't react. He simply stood there listening. Silence pressed against the door from the other side. Not the casual silence of an empty afternoon, but something thicker. Arranged. Staged. Daniel reached into the inside pocket of his coat and removed a small key on a separate ring. He had never told Evelyn about it. Not because he distrusted her, because he understood contingency. He slid the key into the lock. The door opened. The air inside was still. No music. No television murmuring in the background. No scent of coffee or perfume. Just the faint trace of lemon cleaner. His shoes echoed against the hardwood as he stepped inside and closed the door gently behind him. "Evelyn," he called, his voice steady. No answer. He moved through the foyer slowly, noting details without appearing to. The framed photographs were still in place. The antique clock ticked against the wall. The furniture hadn't been disturbed, but something was missing. He didn't know what yet. Then he saw it. A single sheet of paper on the kitchen counter. Centered. Deliberate. Waiting. He approached it the way one approaches an unfamiliar animal. Calmly, without sudden movement. The handwriting was hers. He would have known it in the dark. "I'm done with you. The house is sold. Pack and leave." No signature. No explanation. No emotion in the strokes. Just finality. Daniel read it once. Then again. He set the medical folder down beside the sink and rested both hands on the edge of the counter. His reflection in the stainless steel toaster looked distorted, elongated. "Done with you. The house is sold. Pack and leave." 17 years reduced to 4 sentences. He didn't feel anger. Not yet. What he felt was stillness. The kind that comes before calculation. He pulled out one of the kitchen chairs and sat down slowly. His heart rate remained steady. The neurologist would have been proud. He studied the paper more closely. No indentations beneath it. No additional pages. Just a message. His eyes drifted toward the hallway. The bedroom door stood open. Closet doors ajar. She had packed. Not in a rush. Not in chaos. Organized absence. He rose and walked down the hallway. The master closet was half empty. Her shoes were gone. Jewelry box missing. The top drawer where she kept passports. Open. He stepped back into the kitchen. Sold. Using what authority? He exhaled through his nose. Power of attorney. He had signed limited POA documents after the stroke, narrowly drafted, specific to medical contingencies and temporary financial management during hospitalization. Limited. Very limited. Daniel returned his attention to the paper. He picked it up, turned it over. Blank. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a pen, the heavy silver one he'd carried for decades. He stood there for a long moment, not angry, not trembling, just very, very still. Then, with calm precision, he wrote 2 words. Check again. He pressed the pen firmly enough to leave an imprint. Folded nothing, added nothing. He placed the paper back exactly where she had left it, aligned with the counter's edge. Symmetry mattered. He picked up his medical folder and walked to the front door. He paused once, scanning the house. The dining table where they'd hosted Christmas dinners. The staircase where she once slipped and he caught her before she fell. The faint dent in the wall from when they'd moved the piano in. He felt no urge to shout, no desire to break anything. He simply opened the door and stepped outside. The afternoon sun felt different now. Sharper. He locked the door behind him with the spare key and slipped it back into his pocket. As he reached his car, his phone vibrated. He looked at the screen. Evelyn. He let ring. It stopped, then rang again. He placed the phone face down on the passenger seat and started the engine. By the time he reached the end of the street, it rang a 5th time. He drove calmly, obeyed every traffic signal, checked his mirrors. The calls continued. When he parked 2 blocks away at a quiet public lot overlooking the river, he finally turned the phone face up. 17 missed calls. A voicemail notification appeared. He did not press play. The screen lit up again. Evelyn. He watched it vibrate across the dashboard. Let ring. Stop. Ring again. He imagined her returning to the house, seeing the paper, flipping it over, reading the 2 words. Check again. By the time the sun began to dip, the call log read 37 missed calls. He silenced the device, rested his hands on the steering wheel, and stared out at the slow-moving water. Daniel was many things. Surprised wasn't one of them. Chapter 2, 12 years earlier. 12 years earlier, the house had smelled like fresh paint and ambition. Evelyn had stood in the middle of the living room with her hands on her hips, sunlight pouring through the tall windows, declaring, "This is it. This is where we grow old." Daniel had smiled at her certainty. He had already been growing old for years. At the time, he was 52 and 23 years deep into a career most people found boring and he found beautiful. Estate planning, asset structuring, risk mitigation. He had built a reputation on one quiet principle. The world erodes what is not protected. He used to tell clients, "You're not planning for death. You're planning for friction." They would laugh nervously. They always signed. That spring, he had sat at the oak desk in his home office, the same desk that would later face an empty closet, flipping through a draft trust document with a pencil in hand. Evelyn knocked lightly on the doorframe. "Are you working again?" "I'm reading," he replied without looking up. "That's what you call it." He set the pencil down and leaned back. "Come here." She stepped in, curious. "What is it?" He tapped the top page. "I'm transferring the house into a trust." Her forehead creased. "Why?" "Because I can." "That's not an answer." "It is," he said gently. "It's just not dramatic." She crossed her arms. "Daniel, we just bought this place. Why complicate it?" He gestured toward the paperwork. "It's not complication. It's insulation." "From what?" "From erosion." She laughed. "You and your metaphors." "I'm serious." He leaned forward. "If something happens to me, medically, legally, cognitively, I don't want this property exposed. Not to creditors. Not to opportunists. Not to mistakes." She softened at that. "Nothing is going to happen to you." He smiled faintly. "That's not how probability works." The trust had a name that sounded ordinary on purpose. Henderson Asset Protection Trust. It was irrevocable, properly structured, clean. He would be managing trustee. The house would belong to the trust. Not to him, not to Evelyn, to an entity designed to outlive volatility. When he signed the final document in his downtown office, his colleague Margaret glanced over the pages and nodded. "You're protecting against divorce." "I'm protecting against exposure." "Same thing sometimes," she said dryly. He didn't respond. He filed the deed transfer with the county recorder that afternoon. The clerk stamped it without ceremony. Ink pressed into paper. A small, quiet shift in ownership that changed everything. At dinner that night, Evelyn raised her glass. "To our house." Daniel clinked gently. "To stewardship." She rolled her eyes. "Normal people just say cheers." He smiled but didn't explain further. Because normal people assume stability. Daniel understood erosion, legal, emotional, medical. He had watched clients lose everything because they believed love was a binding contract. He had watched families fracture over unsigned documents. He had seen children lock parents out of accounts. He had seen spouses leverage confusion. Preparation wasn't pessimism. It was mathematics. Years passed. The house settled around them. Seasons layered memories into walls and floors. Birthdays, holidays, arguments, reconciliations. The trust remained invisible, exactly as intended. Then came the stroke. It arrived without theatrics, a glass slipping from his hand, words blurring mid-sentence, Evelyn's voice rising in sharp, unfamiliar panic. In the hospital, beneath fluorescent lights, Daniel watched ceiling tiles while machines beeped in polite rhythm. "Minor," they said again. He nodded, but something had shifted. Mortality was no longer theoretical. After he returned home, moving slower but thinking as clearly as ever, he asked Evelyn to bring him his briefcase. "You're not working," she protested. "I'm reviewing." "What's the difference?" "Control," he said quietly. She didn't like that answer. He spent afternoons in his office with the door partially closed, not hiding, just focusing. He reviewed every structure, trust provisions, successor trustee clauses, distribution limitations. He confirmed trustee authority in writing. He updated internal memoranda. He reread the original deed transfer and checked the county's digital record to ensure it remained clean. It did. He then drafted a revised power of attorney document. Limited, precise, medical decision authority in defined scenarios. Temporary financial execution only under certified incapacity. No authority to transfer trust-held property. No authority to alter beneficiary structures. He called Margaret. "Paranoid?" she asked lightly. "Prepared," he corrected. "You think something's coming?" "Something is always coming." She grew serious. "You're not wrong." They finalized the updated POA in her office. 2 witnesses. Notary's seal. Crisp signatures. He drove personally to the county recorder's office and filed supplemental notice documents clarifying trust ownership and trustee status. The clerk stamped those 2. Ink again. Quiet reinforcement. That evening, Evelyn stood in the kitchen watching him make tea. "You've been distant. I've been careful." "Careful about what?" "Entropy." She frowned. "You talk like something is already falling apart." He met her gaze evenly. "I talk like things eventually do." She stepped closer. "Are you afraid?" He considered the question. "No," he said finally. "I'm aware." Later that night, lying awake beside her, he stared at the ceiling and listened to her breathing even out into sleep. He wasn't planning for betrayal. He wasn't expecting abandonment. He wasn't constructing traps. He was doing what he had always done, structuring against possibility, because he had seen too much not to. He had seen love decay under pressure. He had seen illness become leverage. He had seen ignorance weaponized. He trusted character, but he trusted documentation more. In the weeks after the stroke, as his strength returned, he organized digital backups of every filing. Encrypted copies stored securely. Paper originals sealed. When he closed the final folder, he rested his palm on it for a moment. Not out of fear, out of clarity. You don't prepare for betrayal because you expect it. You prepare because you understand probability. We begin to see. He didn't react today. He anticipated. Chapter 3, Evelyn's version of the story. The first time Daniel's hand stopped responding, Evelyn thought he was joking. They were in the kitchen. He had been reaching for a glass of water. It slipped, shattered against the tile, and he just stood there staring at his fingers as if they belonged to someone else. "Daniel," she had asked, laughing nervously. "Very funny." And he tried to speak. The word never finished forming. The ambulance siren became a sound she would hear in her sleep for weeks. At the hospital, doctors said minor. They said recovery likely. They said manageable. But Evelyn didn't hear the adjectives. She heard stroke. She heard brain. She heard decline. In the weeks that followed, she watched him differently. Every pause in his speech felt like a crack forming. Every moment he closed his eyes felt like a rehearsal for something permanent. He retreated into his office after he came home. Not dramatically, just consistently. Folders appeared on his desk. Legal pads. Quiet phone calls. Who was that? She asked one afternoon, leaning against the doorframe. Margaret, he replied without looking up. What about? Documentation. What documentation? Housekeeping. She hated that word. Housekeeping meant she wasn't being told something. She stepped further into the room. Daniel, I need to understand what's happening. Nothing is happening, he said calmly. I'm reviewing structures. Structures, she repeated. Do you ever hear yourself? He finally looked at her then. His eyes were steady. Too steady. I'm making sure you're protected. The sentence should have comforted her. It didn't. Protected by whom? From what? And why did it feel like he was building walls she couldn't see? Nights became heavier. She lay awake listening to his breathing, counting seconds between exhales. Once, she nudged him at 2 a.m. just to confirm he would stir. He did. Evelyn, he murmured, half asleep. What is it? Nothing, she whispered. Just checking. Checking what? That he was still there. But beneath the fear of losing him was another fear she didn't want to name. What if he didn't die? What if he faded? What if she became caretaker instead of wife? She began searching things online late at night. Cognitive decline after stroke. Long-term prognosis. Spousal caregiver burnout. Financial planning for incapacitated partners. The numbers frightened her. So did the stories. It was during one of those anxious afternoons that she ran into Travis Lang. She had known him casually for years. He was charming in a way that felt effortless. Tailored suits, confident smile, voice always half a tone warmer than necessary. They crossed paths at a charity event downtown. Evelyn Henderson, he said, recognizing her instantly. It's been too long. She forced a smile. It has. I heard about Daniel. How is he? Recovering, she said. The word felt fragile. Travis tilted his head sympathetically. That must have been terrifying. It was the first time someone had said it plainly. Yes, she admitted. He lowered his voice. Coffee. She hesitated only a moment before nodding. At the cafe, he listened in a way Daniel no longer seemed to. Or maybe she just needed someone to. He's different, she said, stirring her cup though she wasn't adding anything. Not physically, just somewhere else. Trauma changes people, Travis replied smoothly. He's reviewing documents constantly, making changes I don't fully understand. That's not unusual after something like this, Travis said. People panic about control. The word landed hard. Control. He says he's protecting me, she murmured. Travis leaned forward. Evelyn, can I ask you something bluntly? She nodded. Do you know exactly what you would have if something happened to him tomorrow? She opened her mouth, closed it. He held her gaze. Do you know what's in your name? What's accessible? What's liquid? I have power of attorney, she said defensively. POA is authority, not ownership, he replied. It doesn't guarantee security. Her stomach tightened. Over the next few weeks, coffee became dinner. Dinner became long drives. Long drives became confessions. Travis spoke about his condo development, a high-rise project near the marina. Sleek renderings, glass balconies. Pre-sales were strong, he said one evening, staring into his drink. But financing tightened. Banks are nervous. How bad? She asked. He exhaled slowly. Temporary cash flow issue. Later she learned the bridge loan was over $500,000. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because I trust you, he said. Trust. It felt intoxicating. One night, as they sat in his car overlooking the city lights, he said it clearly. Daniel won't live long. She stiffened. Don't say that. I'm not wishing it, he replied gently. I'm being realistic. Stroke at his age? It's a warning shot. You don't know that. I know risk. He paused. And you deserve stability. The word echoed in her mind. Stability. What are you suggesting? She asked. I'm suggesting you need to secure yourself. He explained it like strategy, not betrayal. You have POA, he said. You can act in his interest. Consolidate. Liquidate unnecessary exposure. Move assets into something safer. The house, she whispered. It's the largest piece, he said. Free up the equity. Protect it. Protect it. The irony didn't register. He framed it as practicality, as foresight, as courage. You don't want to be trapped, he continued softly. Watching him decline, fighting over paperwork, dependent on structures you don't understand. That part stung, because it was true. She didn't understand his structures. She didn't understand why he never explained them fully. She didn't understand why everything important felt invisible. The paperwork was prepared quickly after that. A buyer appeared, connected to Travis's network. Cash, Travis assured her. Clean. Simple. She signed using power of attorney. Her hand trembled slightly, but she told herself it was adrenaline. I'm doing this for security, she whispered. For both of us, Travis replied. She believed she was being practical. She believed she was stepping into control. She believed she was correcting imbalance. She didn't realize she was stepping into a structure she didn't understand. Chapter 4, The Closing. The office smelled like polished wood and expensive optimism. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the marina, sunlight glinting off anchored boats as if the day itself had signed off on the transaction. The conference table was a slab of dark walnut, its surface gleaming beneath recessed lighting. A silver tray held bottled water no one had touched. Evelyn sat upright in a cream-colored chair, legs crossed carefully at the ankle, hands resting on a leather folder in front of her. She had chosen her outfit with intention: navy sheath dress, pearl earrings, hair pinned neatly back. Composed, capable, unshaken. Across from her, the buyers, a quiet couple in their late 40s, flipped through documents with the cautious excitement of people about to claim something large and permanent. The escrow officer adjusted her glasses. We're almost finished. Just a few signatures remaining. Travis sat beside Evelyn, relaxed, one arm draped along the back of her chair. He leaned toward her slightly and whispered, "See? Clean. Simple." She inhaled slowly through her nose. Clean. Simple. On the table, placed with ceremony, sat the cashier's check. Thick paper, heavy ink, a number that looked unreal. For a moment, she imagined the equity converted into freedom. No more uncertainty. No more late-night panic about medical reports. No more quiet rooms filled with folders she didn't understand. The escrow officer slid the final page toward her. Sign here, an initial there. Evelyn reached for the pen. The door opened. Not abruptly, not violently, just opened. Every head in the room turned. Daniel stepped inside. He wore a charcoal suit she hadn't seen in months. His posture was straight. His expression neutral, not angry, not wounded. Present. Behind him walked Margaret, composed as always, a structured leather briefcase in her hand. Two detectives followed, badges clipped discreetly at their belts. The air shifted. Travis straightened. What is this? Daniel closed the door gently behind him. Good afternoon, he said, voice steady. I apologize for the interruption. The escrow officer blinked. Sir, this is a private closing. I'm aware. Evelyn's throat tightened. Daniel, what are you doing here? He looked at her, not accusingly, not even coldly, simply assessing. I received notice of a pending transfer, he replied. I thought it appropriate to attend. Travis stood. You have no standing here. Margaret stepped forward smoothly. Actually, he does. She placed her briefcase on the table and opened it with a soft click. Inside were neatly tabbed folders. The buyers exchanged uneasy glances. Daniel walked to the opposite side of the table and rested his hands lightly on the wood. He did not sit. I won't take much of your time, he said. But there appears to be a fundamental misunderstanding regarding ownership. Evelyn felt her pulse in her temples. Daniel, we discussed. No, he said gently. We didn't. Margaret slid a certified document across the table toward the escrow officer. Henderson Asset Protection Trust, she stated clearly. Irrevocable. Established 12 years ago. Property transferred via recorded deed. Book and page number listed on the second page. The escrow officer's brows furrowed as she scanned the document. Travis scoffed. That's irrelevant. She has power of attorney. Margaret nodded calmly. Limited power of attorney. Medical authority and conditional financial execution in cases of certified incapacity. Neither of which apply here. Daniel's gaze never left Evelyn. The house, he said evenly, is not owned personally. It belongs to the trust. I'm the managing trustee. Silence thickened. The buyers looked from one face to another. I'm sorry, the woman said hesitantly. Are you saying this sale isn't valid? I'm saying, Daniel replied, that the seller lacks authority to transfer the asset. Margaret placed another document on the table. Filed notice of dispute with the county recorder at 8:12 a.m. this morning. Certified copy attached. The escrow officer's face paled slightly. This wasn't disclosed. It couldn't be, Margaret said calmly, because it was never legitimate. Travis stepped closer to Daniel. You're trying to intimidate everyone. Daniel turned to him, composed. No, I'm clarifying. He reached into his inside pocket and removed a folded document. This is the recorded deed transfer from 12 years ago. The property has been trust-held since that date. The escrow officer flipped quickly through her file. Her movements became smaller, more precise. There's no trust documentation in our packet, she murmured. Because the trust, Margaret said, was never consulted. Evelyn's mouth fell dry. Daniel, this is ridiculous. I have POA. I can act in your interest. He met her eyes. You cannot sell what you do not own. The words were not raised. They didn't need to be. One of the detectives stepped forward slightly. We're here to observe and document. No one is under arrest. The buyers visibly recoiled at the word. Arrest, the man repeated. Daniel lifted a hand gently. Let's not escalate terminology. Margaret spoke clearly. If funds have been wired under misrepresentation of authority, it could constitute wire fraud exposure. That is precisely what we are preventing. The cashier's check sat between them, suddenly radioactive. The escrow officer swallowed. Given this information, we cannot proceed. Travis's jaw tightened. You can't just shut this down. I can, she replied firmly. And I will. She reached across the table and, with deliberate care, lifted the cashier's check. The paper made a faint sliding sound against the polished surface. The buyers stood. I think we need to consult our attorney, the woman said quickly. Yes, Daniel replied politely. That would be wise. Chairs shifted. Papers gathered. The room that had felt celebratory minutes ago now felt like a courtroom without a judge. Evelyn remained seated. Her hands were still on the leather folder, but they were no longer steady. Daniel, she whispered, barely audible. Why didn't you tell me? I did, he said quietly. You just didn't ask the right questions. Margaret closed her briefcase. The detective stepped back toward the door. The escrow officer cleared her throat. This closing is terminated pending legal clarification. No one argued. No one shouted. The unraveling was too complete for noise. Daniel straightened his cuffs and stepped away from the table. For everyone's sake, he said evenly, I suggest no further action be taken until proper authority is confirmed. He looked once more at Evelyn. Not with triumph. Not with cruelty. Just recognition. The check was gone. The buyers were leaving. Travis stood rigid, fists clenched at his sides, and Evelyn's hands began to shake. Chapter 5, The Debt Beneath the Sale. Margaret's office overlooked the courthouse square, a red brick building that had seen a century of disputes settled in lowered voices and stamped documents. The afternoon light filtered through tall windows, casting long bars across the conference table where Daniel now sat. He had removed his jacket, but not his composure. Margaret poured 2 glasses of water and slid one toward him. You handled that cleanly, she said. It wasn't personal, Daniel replied. It rarely is, she said, settling into the chair across from him. That's why it stings. He didn't respond to that. Instead, he opened a slim black folder he had brought with him and turned it toward her. Inside were bank statements, highlighted transaction lines, and printed email chains. You were right, she said quietly, glancing at the first page. There were transfers. Unusual ones, Daniel corrected. The pattern had begun 6 weeks after his stroke. Small amounts at first. 5,000, 8,000, labeled vaguely. Consulting fee, short-term investment, interim allocation. He might not have noticed if he hadn't made a habit of noticing. One evening, while Evelyn showered upstairs, he sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, scrolling slowly through joint account activity. He did not confront her. He did not assume. He simply marked the dates. The next morning, he called someone he had trusted for nearly 2 decades. Caleb, he had said when the man answered. I need discretion. Caleb Harris was a forensic accountant with the patience of a chess player and the demeanor of a math professor. They had worked together on complex estate disputes before, tracing hidden accounts, untangling layer transfers. Personal? Caleb had asked. Yes. Then I'll treat it like surgery. They met in Caleb's downtown office, a quiet space filled with dual monitors and too many spreadsheets to count. Daniel handed him the printed statements. I want to know where this is going. Caleb adjusted his glasses. How far back? 3 months. And if it leads somewhere you don't like? Daniel had held his gaze. Then it leads somewhere. It took less than 2 weeks. Caleb called him on a Tuesday evening. You're not going to like this. I didn't hire you for comfort. There's a pattern of transfers routed through a shell LLC tied to a development group. Marina Vista Holdings. Daniel knew the name. Travis Lang had mentioned the project once at a dinner party years ago. Luxury condos overlooking the water. Pre-sales, investors, renderings on glossy boards. Is it solvent? Daniel asked. Caleb exhaled. Barely. They took out a private bridge loan to cover construction overruns. High interest. Short term. How high? $520,000 outstanding. Balloon payment approaching. And the lender? Private equity group out of Chicago. Aggressive terms. Daniel leaned back slowly in his chair. Evelyn's transfers, Caleb continued, align almost exactly with their interest payments. Silence stretched between them. She's funding him, Caleb said quietly. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. Not in shock. In confirmation. Can a loan be purchased? Daniel asked. Caleb blinked. You want to buy the debt? I want to understand my options. There was a pause. It's possible, Caleb said carefully, but would require a clean intermediary and discretion. I prefer both. Within a week, Daniel had formed a holding entity, discreet, legally structured, unconnected in name to him personally. Paperwork filed. Capital allocated. Margaret had reviewed the documents without comment. You're certain? She asked at the time. I don't move without certainty. The private equity group was eager to offload the bridge loan. The project's delays made it risky. Daniel's entity purchased the debt at a slight discount, assuming full rights to repayment. He signed the final transfer agreement in silence. Travis Lang never knew the lender had changed. Back in Margaret's office now, Daniel flipped to the final page of the folder, the assignment agreement bearing his entity's signature. Margaret traced the lines with her finger. So, if the house sale had gone through, the proceeds would have paid the bridge loan, Daniel finished. Which you now own. Yes. She leaned back, studying him. She tried to liquidate trust property to rescue his failing development. Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She tried to move an asset she did not control to satisfy a liability she did not disclose. And you stopped it. I prevented theft. Margaret's eyes sharpened. You also gained leverage. That was incidental. She gave him a look that suggested she didn't entirely believe that. He met her gaze evenly. If the funds had cleared, the debt would be extinguished. Quietly, cleanly. My trust asset gone. His project stabilized. And I would have funded it. Through your own property. Exactly. Margaret closed the folder gently. Does he know? Not yet. And when he finds out, Daniel's expression didn't change. You'll have options, such as restructure, renegotiate, default. And if he defaults, I enforce the original terms. The room felt smaller suddenly. Margaret folded her hands on the table. You could accelerate the debt, collapse the project. I could. Will you? Daniel stared out the window at the courthouse steps below, where strangers climbed and descended without knowing how fragile their circumstances were. No, he said finally. Why? Because collapse isn't my objective. What is? He turned back to her. Containment. Margaret studied him for a long moment. This isn't about humiliation, she said. No, or a punishment. No. He placed both hands flat on the table, grounding the conversation. The house was not hers to sell. The equity was not his to claim. I stopped the transaction because it was unlawful, and the debt is now secured. She nodded slowly. You anticipated she might try something like this. I anticipated pressure, he corrected. Pressure reveals structure, and you reinforced yours. Yes. Margaret exhaled quietly. You realize how this looks. I do. Cold. Calculated. Daniel didn't flinch. I'm not interested in appearing warm, he said. I'm interested in preventing erosion. Margaret allowed herself a small, reluctant smile. You always were. He stood and slipped his jacket back on. This isn't revenge, he said calmly. It's containment. Chapter 6, The Confrontation. They met at the house. Not because it was comfortable, because it was neutral. The buyers were gone. The closing had collapsed. Travis had stopped calling after Daniel's name appeared on the bridge loan documentation that afternoon. Silence had spread outward in widening circles. Evelyn stood in the kitchen when Daniel walked in. The same kitchen. The same counter where the note had rested. Only now there was no paper between them. Thank you for coming, she said, her voice tight. I said I would, he replied. No lawyers. No witnesses. Just truth. The air felt heavier than it had during the closing. There was no polished table here, no escrow officer to interrupt. Only the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock. Evelyn looked thinner. Or maybe it was simply that the composure she'd worn so carefully had dissolved. Do you want coffee? She asked reflexively. No. She nodded and clasped her hands together as if to stop them from trembling. For a long moment, neither spoke. Daniel waited. He had learned long ago that silence invites confession. She broke first. I was afraid, she said, the words spilling out faster than she seemed prepared for. When you had the stroke, I thought, her voice faltered. I thought that was the beginning. Of what? He asked quietly. Of losing you. Of watching you disappear slowly. Of becoming your nurse instead of your wife. He absorbed that without visible reaction. You stopped talking to me, she continued. You went into your office and closed the door. You started moving money around. Reviewing things. Changing things. I reviewed structures, he corrected gently. That's exactly what I mean, she snapped, frustration cracking through. Structures. Documents. Trusts. You never explained anything in plain language. I felt like a guest in my own life. Daniel's gaze didn't waver. You never asked for specifics. I shouldn't have to beg to understand our finances. You didn't have to beg. Then why did it always feel like I did? The question hung there. He did not answer it. She turned away, pacing toward the window and back again. Travis said. She stopped herself. Finish the sentence, Daniel said. She swallowed. He said you wouldn't live long. Daniel's expression did not change. He said strokes are warnings. That men your age don't recover the same way. That I needed to secure myself before it was too late. And you believed him. I believe the fear, she shot back. I wake up at night listening to you breathe. I check your pulse sometimes. Did you know that? He did not respond. You were fading, she insisted. Maybe not physically, but emotionally. You were somewhere else. I was protecting the house, he said calmly. From me? From possibility. She laughed bitterly. That's what you always say. Probability. Possibility. You talk like marriage is a math problem. It is a contract, he said evenly. Her eyes flashed. It was supposed to be more than that. Silence again. Then the rest came out in pieces. I changed the life insurance beneficiary, she admitted quietly. He blinked once. That was all. To whom? She hesitated. A temporary designation. Name. Travis. The word landed softly, but carried weight. For how long? 2 weeks, she whispered. I panicked. I thought if something happened suddenly, I would be left fighting paperwork. You would not have been. How do I know that? You never show me anything. He exhaled slowly. What else? He asked. She pressed her lips together. I recorded some conversations. With whom? With you. His eyes sharpened slightly. About your health, she said quickly. About your symptoms. Travis said it would be smart to have documentation in case there were disputes later. Disputes about what? Capacity. The word felt like ice. Daniel absorbed it fully before speaking. You intended to question my competence. I didn't know what was going to happen, she cried. I felt alone. He told me I could be left with nothing. That if you were declared incapacitated and everything was locked in trust, I have no access. The trust provided for you, he said. I didn't understand it. You never asked to. I did, she insisted. And you gave me lectures. The room vibrated with years of miscommunication neither of them had named before. "And the sale?" he asked. She closed her eyes briefly. Travis's project was failing. He needed to cover the bridge loan. He said if the project collapsed, we'd both be exposed socially, financially. He said selling the house was smart. Liquid. Safe. Safe for whom? She didn't answer. "I thought I was being practical," she said finally. "I thought I was taking control before everything spiraled." Daniel studied her for a long time. He did not yell. He did not cry. He simply said, "Fear explains behavior. It does not excuse it." The words were steady, not harsh, just final. She sank into a chair. "I never meant to hurt you. That is irrelevant to outcome." Tears welled in her eyes. "So what now?" He reached into his briefcase and placed a slim document folder on the table. "I have no interest in criminal proceedings," he said. "That benefits no one." She looked up quickly. "You're not pressing charges?" "Not if you agree to terms." Her relief was immediate, visible. "What terms?" "Uncontested divorce." The word hit her harder than anything else had. "You're serious?" "Yes." She swallowed. "Full financial transparency," he continued. "Complete disclosure of all accounts, transfers, communications related to this matter." She nodded slowly. "And a written acknowledgement of misuse of power of attorney authority." Her shoulders slumped. "That will ruin me. It will prevent escalation." She stared at the folder. "You're done," she said quietly. "I am contained," he replied. She wiped at her face. "And if I refuse?" He held her gaze evenly. "Then I pursue all legal remedies available." The clock ticked. 17 years condensed into a stack of papers. Her hand hovered over the pen. "Was there ever a moment," she asked softly, "when you thought I wouldn't do this?" He considered the question honestly. "Yes." "And when did that change?" "When the transfers began." She flinched. He pushed the pen toward her gently. "This protects both of us," he said. She let out a shaky breath and began to sign, each signature slower than the last. When she finished, she slid the folder back across the table. It felt heavier now. She looked at him one final time, searching for anger, for softness, for something familiar. He stood, collected the documents, and nodded once. The terms were clear, and she had signed. Chapter 7, Civil Court. The courtroom was smaller than Evelyn expected. There were no dramatic wood-paneled walls or high theatrical ceilings like the ones on television. Just fluorescent lighting, rows of worn benches, and a raised bench where the judge would sit in quiet authority. Daniel stood near the front beside Margaret. He wore the same charcoal suit from the closing, pressed and deliberate. His posture was straight, his expression neutral. He wasn't scanning the room for reactions. He wasn't posturing. He was waiting. Evelyn sat at the opposite table with her attorney, a cautious man who kept adjusting his tie as if it were tightening by the minute. She clasped her hands in her lap to keep them from trembling. Across the aisle sat Travis and his counsel. Travis no longer looked relaxed. There was no marina view here, no polished walnut table, no cashier's check resting between them like a promise. Only paperwork, stacks of it. The bailiff called the case. Everyone stood as the judge entered, a woman in her late 60s with sharp eyes and an economy of movement that suggested she had little patience for theatrics. "Be seated," she said. The rustle of fabric and wood echoed briefly. Margaret rose first. "Your Honor, this matter concerns the attempted sale of property held within the Henderson Asset Protection Trust, as well as the misuse of limited power of attorney authority." She spoke clearly, without embellishment. Evelyn felt the words land like pebbles in a still pond. Margaret handed up certified copies of the trust documents. The judge adjusted her glasses and began reviewing. "Established 12 years ago," she murmured. "Irrevocable. Managing trustee, Daniel Henderson." "Yes, Your Honor," Margaret replied. "And the property deed transfer was properly recorded at that time?" "Yes. Book and page number referenced here." The judge flipped pages slowly, methodically. "Ms. Henderson," she said, looking over the rim of her glasses at Evelyn, "were you aware the property was transferred into this trust?" Evelyn swallowed. "I knew it existed. I didn't understand the structure. That is not the same as lack of notice." "No, Your Honor," Margaret continued, Following Mr. Henderson's minor stroke, a limited power of attorney was executed. It grants medical decision-making authority and conditional financial authority in the event of certified incapacity. The judge nodded. Was there a certification of incapacity? No, Your Honor. The judge looked at Evelyn again. Did you obtain medical documentation declaring your husband incapacitated? No. Then on what basis did you attempt to transfer trust property? Evelyn's attorney stood. Your Honor, my client acted under significant emotional distress following a medical event. She believed she was acting in her husband's best interest. The judge's expression didn't soften. Belief, she said calmly, does not expand legal authority. A faint murmur passed through the room. Margaret then submitted the recorded evidence. Bank transfers traced to Marina Vista Holdings, the bridge loan documentation, and the assignment agreement transferring the loan to Daniel's holding entity. Travis shifted visibly in his seat. The judge reviewed the assignment papers. Mr. Lang, she said, your development company secured a private bridge loan for $520,000? Yes, Your Honor. And that loan was subsequently assigned to an entity now controlled by Mr. Henderson? Travis hesitated. Yes. Did you disclose to Ms. Henderson that the house sale proceeds would be used to satisfy this debt? Travis's attorney interjected. Your Honor, the financing details of my client's project are not directly relevant. They are, the judge interrupted, her voice firm but even, when they intersect with attempted liquidation of trust property. Silence followed. Travis cleared his throat. She understood. I needed liquidity. The judge's gaze was sharp. Liquidity funded by an asset she did not own. No one spoke. Margaret stepped forward again. Your Honor, Mr. Henderson did not act to humiliate or retaliate. He acted to prevent unlawful transfer of trust property and to secure a debt exposure that directly intersected with that attempted sale. The judge leaned back slightly, folding her hands. Let me be clear, she said. The Henderson Asset Protection Trust is valid. The property transfer 12 years ago was lawful and properly recorded. The attempted sale conducted under limited power of attorney authority was invalid. Evelyn felt her chest tighten. The sale is void, the judge continued. The trust remains intact. She turned to Evelyn. The misuse of power of attorney authority is acknowledged by this court. Evelyn lowered her eyes. Given the circumstances, the judge added, temporary financial oversight is granted pending final divorce proceedings. Transparency is required. Margaret nodded. The judge then looked toward Travis. As to the bridge loan, debt assignment is a lawful financial mechanism. Strategic debt acquisition is not a crime. Her voice carried no sarcasm, only fact. Travis's jaw tightened. If Mr. Henderson now holds the note, the judge continued, he retains the same rights and remedies as the original lender. That matter remains contractual. She paused before concluding. This court does not adjudicate emotion. It adjudicates authority. And in this matter, authority was exceeded. The gavel struck once. Clean. Final. People began to stand, papers gathering, chairs shifting. Evelyn remained seated for a moment longer. Across the aisle, Daniel collected his documents methodically. He did not look triumphant. He did not glance toward her for acknowledgement. He simply closed his folder. As he turned to leave, their eyes met. There was no anger in his expression, no bitterness, just something she hadn't recognized before. Restraint. She had told herself for weeks that he was passive, that he was fading, that he was too quiet to resist. But standing there now, calm in the aftermath of public scrutiny, she understood something with painful clarity. She didn't marry a passive man. She married a patient one. Chapter 8, Fallout. The Marina Vista site went quiet on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, the crane had stopped moving. By Friday, the subcontractors were asking questions no one could answer. Evelyn heard about it through whispers before she saw it in writing. A friend from the country club texted her a link to a local business column. Construction paused amid financing review. Financing review. She stared at the phrase as if it were a foreign language. By then, she was no longer living in the house. The rental was a 2-bedroom unit over a floor shop downtown. The carpet smelled faintly of detergent and something older beneath it. The kitchen window looked out onto an alley where delivery trucks idled in the mornings. She hadn't unpacked fully. Boxes lined the hallway like temporary monuments to decisions she could not undo. Her phone rang one evening as she sat cross-legged on the floor, staring at a stack of unopened mail. Travis. She hesitated before answering. What happened? She asked immediately. They're overreacting, he said, voice tight. The lender is pushing. You mean Daniel? There was a pause. Yes. What is he doing? Nothing, Travis snapped. That's the problem. She frowned. I don't understand. He's not accelerating. He's not calling the note due. He's just enforcing. Enforcing what? The original terms, Travis said bitterly. Interest schedule, reporting requirements, collateral clauses. That's what lenders do. He's not supposed to be the lender. But he is. Silence stretched between them. He could crush this, Travis said finally. One move. Demand full payment. Force liquidation. Is he? No, then what's the issue? The issue, Travis said sharply, is that he's waiting. Evelyn felt something shift inside her. Waiting. Daniel had always been good at that. Across town, Daniel stood in the master bedroom, an open suitcase on the bed. He folded shirts with the same precision he brought to contracts. Not hurried, not sentimental, methodical. The house felt larger now, quieter. He paused at the dresser and opened the top drawer. Cufflinks, a watch he hadn't worn in years, an envelope of old photographs. He looked at one briefly, Evelyn laughing on a beach somewhere warmer than this town ever was. He returned it to the envelope. There was no ceremony in his packing, no music playing in the background, just soft fabric against fabric. His phone buzzed. Margaret. Travis reached out, she said when he answered. I assumed he would. He's asking to renegotiate the note. Daniel zipped the suitcase halfway, then sat on the edge of the bed. On what grounds? Hardship, project delays, market volatility. Those were risks disclosed in the original agreement. Yes. And the collateral? Still intact, she replied. For now. Daniel nodded slowly. What do you want to do? Margaret asked. Nothing, he said. She waited for elaboration. I will not accelerate, he continued. I will not amend the interest rate. I will not extend maturity. So you're holding the line? Yes. Margaret exhaled quietly. You realize that if the project collapses fully, you inherit a partially constructed building. I am aware. And I prefer enforceable structure to emotional negotiation. She gave a small, almost amused breath. You're consistent. That's the point. Across town, the social narrative was shifting. At the club, conversations lowered when Evelyn entered. Not dramatically, subtly. One afternoon, she approached a table where two women had been chatting animatedly. Their smiles faltered. Hi, she said carefully. Hi, Evelyn. One of them replied, tone polite but distant. She could feel it, the recalibration. News had traveled faster than she anticipated. Not the full story, but enough of it. Attempted sale, trust dispute, court ruling, bridge loan. People fill in gaps with imagination. And imagination is rarely generous. Later that week, she ran into an acquaintance in the grocery store. I heard things got complicated, the woman said, eyes wide with curated sympathy. Yes, Evelyn replied evenly. They did. Well, I hope everything works out. Work out. As if this were a scheduling conflict. Back at the rental, she opened a kitchen cabinet and realized she owned more serving platters than plates. She sank into a chair and laughed once, short and hollow. Meanwhile, at the Marina Vista site, a temporary fence went up around the entrance. A sign appeared. Financing under review. Travis requested a meeting. Daniel agreed. Not at the house, not at Margaret's office, but in a neutral conference room at a commercial bank. Travis arrived 10 minutes early. Daniel arrived exactly on time. You're enjoying this, Travis said without greeting. Daniel set his briefcase on the table and took a seat. No, you could extend the maturity date, Travis continued. Give me 6 months. The market will stabilize. The terms were clear when you signed. That was before what? Daniel asked calmly. Before everything shifted. Daniel folded his hands. Markets shift. Contracts account for that. Travis leaned forward. You're punishing me. I am enforcing an agreement. You're going to let the project die. I am allowing it to meet the consequences of its structure. Travis's frustration simmered. Why not just accelerate and be done with it, he demanded. Because collapse benefits no one, Daniel replied. Discipline does. The meeting ended without resolution. No raised voices. No dramatic exits. Just a man realizing he no longer controlled his own timeline. That evening, Daniel returned to the house. He walked through each room once more, not to reminisce, but to inventory. The dining room, where arguments had once flared and faded. The staircase where Evelyn had once slipped and he had caught her mid-fall. The kitchen counter where a single sheet of paper had changed everything. He turned off lights as he moved, closed doors gently. The final box sat by the entrance. He lifted it, paused, then set it down again. This was not exile. No one had forced him out. The trust remained intact. The ruling had confirmed it. He was not leaving because he had to. He was leaving because he chose to. He locked the front door for the last time, slipped the key into his pocket, and walked to his car. Daniel begins packing quietly, but not because he was forced to, because he chooses to leave the past behind. Chapter 9, The Lakefront Condo. The lake was quiet in the early morning. Mist hovered just above the surface, curling around the reeds like slow smoke. Daniel stepped onto the balcony of his new condo and inhaled. The air smelled of water, pine, and the faint tang of early spring. 3 months had passed since the divorce was finalized. 3 months of careful, deliberate transition. No chaos, no dramatics, no lingering shadows from the house that had once defined his life. Inside, the condo was sparse. White walls, dark wood floors, minimal furniture. A leather chair by the window. A simple dining table for two. Books stacked neatly on floating shelves. A kitchen devoid of clutter, save for a coffee maker and a single fruit bowl. Daniel unpacked slowly, item by item, letting the rhythm of his own choices dictate the pace. He placed a single framed photograph on the nightstand, a quiet memory from a vacation years ago. Not nostalgic, not bitter, just a marker of life that had passed and life that remained. He moved methodically through the condo, testing the faucets, adjusting the blinds, running a hand over the polished surfaces. The act of arranging his space was an act of reclaiming it. By 7 o'clock a.m., he was walking along the lake path. The ground was soft beneath his shoes, damp with dew. Every step was deliberate, measured, meditative. Geese honked in the distance. A heron lifted silently from the water. He breathed in rhythmically, noticing the tension in his shoulders loosen. People passed him, greeting him with nods or brief smiles. He responded politely but without effort. There was no need for approval, no need for explanation. For the first time in years, Daniel moved through the world with only himself as a reference. Back in the condo, he brewed coffee and opened his laptop. A light consulting client had reached out weeks earlier, and he had accepted a small, manageable project. He didn't need the money. He needed the structure, the challenge, the engagement with a mind outside his own. "Morning, Daniel," he said softly to himself, settling into the chair. He opened emails, responded concisely, scheduled a brief call with the client. Each interaction precise, intentional. No excess energy wasted. Days passed in a rhythm that was unremarkable to an observer but deeply restorative to him. He walked the lake at dawn, returned home, worked lightly, cooked simple meals, read legal journals and old case studies. He allowed himself reflection without obsession. One Saturday evening, he returned from his walk to find the condo unusually silent. His phone blinked with a voicemail notification. He hesitated, hand hovering over the play button. "Daniel, it's me." Evelyn's voice said, quiet, tentative, hesitant in a way that mirrored the woman she had been before everything unraveled. I wanted to apologize," she continued, "for everything. I misjudged you. I didn't think you would fight back. I thought you were passive, that you wouldn't notice, that you wouldn't respond." Her voice wavered slightly. Vulnerability had replaced the carefully constructed composure he remembered. She sounded smaller, human in a way that no court document or legal maneuver could ever reflect. He listened in silence, letting her words hang in the room, letting the cadence of regret settle without interruption. "I know I hurt you," she said, voice trembling. "I know I crossed lines. She paused, took a breath. "I didn't understand the structures you had in place. I thought I could act in our interest. But I see now I misread everything. I misread you." Daniel's eyes rested on the lake beyond the balcony window. The mist had thickened, curling around the water's edge. In it, he saw clarity. In it, he recognized the pattern of his own life: quiet observation, preparation, patience. He had anticipated betrayal. He had contained it. He had moved forward without hatred, without revenge. Her next words barely registered as sound. I just wanted to tell you I'm sorry." He exhaled slowly. Then, with deliberate calm, he pressed the delete button. Not from anger, not from pride, from completion. The lake outside reflected the first stars of the night. He poured a second cup of coffee. The condensation ran down the mug in small, precise rivulets. He lifted it to his lips and tasted nothing but warmth and control. For the first time in a long time, he felt entirely untethered from the past. He had preserved his assets, his dignity, and his health. He had enforced boundaries without cruelty. The condo was quiet. The lights from neighboring buildings glimmered faintly across the water. A soft wind stirred the balcony curtains. Daniel leaned back, letting himself breathe fully, deeply. He knew there would be no further surprises, no sudden calls, no last-minute complications. Everything had been addressed, secured, and closed. And for the first time, he realized that peace was not the absence of conflict, but the presence of clarity. He looked once more at the empty living space. Minimalist, ordered, safe, a place chosen, not forced. The voicemail from Evelyn lingered only in memory. He did not need it as evidence. He did not need it as apology. He did not need it as closure. He had already created his own. He stood on the balcony, watching the lake shimmer under the moonlight. No anger, no bitterness, only certainty, only calm. And in that moment, he understood fully that the story had ended exactly as it should have. He pressed the delete button again in his mind, for the voicemail, for the past, for everything that had weighed on him. Not from anger, from completion. Chapter 10, check again. The balcony railing was cool beneath Daniel's palms. The lake stretched before him, silvered by a pale morning sun, mist curling along the water's edge like smoke rising from a fire long extinguished. It was quiet, a kind of quiet that didn't demand attention, didn't beg for acknowledgement. It simply existed. Daniel leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on the railing, eyes tracing the gentle ripples across the water. He breathed in deeply, the air sharp with the scent of pine and water, carrying faint hints of the dock's varnish and the faintest tang of fish from the shallows. The world felt deliberate, measured, and for the first time in months, entirely under his own observation. He thought of the house, the note on the counter, the garage keypad blinking red, the moment when he had held that piece of paper and calmly written, "Check again." The memory was neither bitter nor sweet. It was simply a reminder. Preparation mattered more than panic. Strategy more than impulse. Inside the condo, the furniture was arranged with intentional minimalism. Each object had its place, each space its purpose. No clutter, no distractions. The air inside smelled faintly of fresh linen and coffee. A simple aroma he had chosen intentionally to begin each morning with clarity. He recalled Evelyn, her fear, her desperation, the misguided belief that she could act without consequence. She had tried to navigate a world she didn't understand, relying on instinct rather than comprehension. And in doing so, she had stepped into a structure that had been carefully maintained long before her concerns even existed. Daniel smiled faintly, not at her, not at the situation, but at the elegance of restraint. He did not revel in triumph. He did not taste revenge. He observed, and in that observation, he found a different satisfaction, one that didn't depend on others' failures or regrets. His mind wandered to Travis Lang, the bridge loan, the failing condo project, the silent leverage Daniel now held. It had been tempting to accelerate, to demand immediate repayment, to exert control, through fear. But that was not his way. He did not need the spectacle. Control had already been achieved quietly, legally, irrevocably. Enforcing the original terms was enough. Daniel's eyes lifted to the horizon. A heron skimmed across the lake, wings extended, moving without resistance or effort. The movement reminded him that patience and timing could coexist with power. You could act without drama. You could contain without cruelty. You could enforce without arrogance. He thought of lessons accumulated over decades. Love without respect is liability. Protection is not paranoia. It is prudence. Silence, when chosen, is sovereignty. Preparation is dignity. These truths were not abstract. They were lived, practiced, verified through action, through careful foresight, and through the measured exercise of authority that never needed justification. He leaned back, letting the sunlight warm his face. The condo was quiet behind him, the minimalism of the space reflecting the minimalism of intent he had carried through every choice. No one could accuse him of impulsiveness. No one could question whether he had acted without understanding. Every move had been deliberate, every word chosen, every document in order. A soft breeze stirred the balcony curtains. Daniel's thoughts returned to the past, the moments of doubt, the flickers of fear, the subtle betrayals that might have undone him if he had been less prepared. He remembered flipping the note on the counter, writing check again, and walking out without a word. The calm of that moment, the stillness, had been everything. He thought of Evelyn again, not with resentment, but with understanding. Fear had guided her choices. Misjudgment had misled her. And in the end, the structures he had built, both financial and personal, had endured. She would carry her lessons forward, just as he carried his own. Neither victory nor punishment were necessary for resolution. The structures themselves had spoken. Daniel glanced down at the balcony floor. The wood beneath his feet was warm from the morning sun. A leaf drifted slowly across the railing, caught for a moment before falling into the water. He noted its path without interference, an observer of motion and consequence. The metaphor was simple. Forces would act, but the prepared and composed would guide the outcomes. Inside, the condo lights flickered briefly as a soft breeze passed through the window. He remembered the voicemail from Evelyn 3 months earlier, the apology, the admission of misjudgment, the recognition that he would fight if necessary. He had listened. He had deleted it. Not from anger, not from pride. From completion. From sovereignty. Daniel allowed himself a small smile, one that didn't reach outward for recognition. This was not triumph, not revenge, not relief. It was finality of another kind, the quiet assertion of control over what mattered, the deliberate choice to exist in the clarity of one's own design. He walked back inside, poured a cup of coffee, and sipped slowly, savoring the warmth and the flavor. The condo was still, the lake beyond glimmering like a mirror for a mind that had seen both deception and preparation, fear and resolution. He reflected again on the lessons of the past year. The stroke, the note, the closing, the court, the fallout. Each moment had been met with observation, patience, and calculation. He had acted when necessary, restrained when possible, and built boundaries that were legally, morally, and strategically unassailable. The peace he now experienced was quiet, deliberate, and absolute. He didn't need to share it. He didn't need to flaunt it. It existed because he had created it, defended it, and maintained it. Others might misjudge. Others might attempt to challenge. But the systems in place, trust, preparation, measured response, were impervious. He looked at the lake once more, letting his mind trace the slow arcs of the waves. The morning sun caught on the water, sending reflections dancing across the balcony glass. He felt a rare satisfaction that was deeper than relief, the kind that comes from mastery, from patience, from understanding that control had never required fury or noise. He returned to his chair, notebook open, pen in hand. He began jotting down ideas, not for defense, not for attack, but for life. Projects, notes, appointments, reflections. Each line deliberate, each intention clear. He was not trapped in memory, nor bound by anger. He was free to move forward with clarity. And in that moment, as the sun climbed higher, he thought again of the note. The key turning, the door closing, the words written calmly on the back. Check again. Not a threat, not a warning, not a taunt. A principle, a guide, a truth distilled into 2 words. Daniel smiled faintly. He had lived it fully, from first note to last reflection. If someone tells you the house is sold, check again. Sovereignty, he realized, did not need applause. It did not require acknowledgement. It existed because it was chosen. And that was enough.